Hi everybody, I'm just going to do a quick screencast here about the college essay. You will be writing a narrative essay, which you can see in the instruction document, and this is just some things to keep in mind as you go about choosing a topic and then also go about planning to how you're going to write it. There are lots of ways to do it, and there are lots of ways to do it well, and there are also a lot of ways to do it that probably won't be as successful, either with me or, more importantly, with college admissions. So, first of all, it should be interesting and unique. That's a given. If you're writing about something that everybody else has done, it won't stand out, and you really want to stand out with this. It should showcase new things. Don't just talk about something that, is again not unique, and also don't talk about something that is happening way far in the past and hasn't had an effect on you recently. It should be something that is a little more recent as a development, and also something that is something you can point to a change in behavior. And it should primarily be a narrative. So even though there is going to be in most of these a section where you explain and you sort of analyze the experience, mostly the essay should be a narrative about the experience. Of course, also clearly address the topic. If you're going with Common App, then you have a list of topics to choose from. If not, then I'm sure they gave you something, some sort of basis. A lot of times those topics are pretty broad, but you definitely want to really keep to the topic and not stray off onto tangents. And make sure, of course, that your essay is technically perfect. You certainly want to proofread it very carefully. Any errors will be a glaring problem for a college admissions officer. So I would of course recommend that you proofread it multiple times, but also you want to have some other people read it. Your parents would probably be a good choice, or some other adults that you trust. Obviously, I'm going to be reading it, and you'll be doing some peer editing. But honestly, the more people that read it, the better chance that you'll have it to that level of perfection that you really want. Okay, so some topics to avoid. Number one, anything that's too personal. So I'm saying here, only choose topics a normal person would tell to an older stranger who wasn't creepy. The reason I say older is sometimes you're a little bit more open with people your own age, and you might be willing to talk to them about things that you wouldn't necessarily talk to somebody who's older, like my age, about. And that's fine, but for this, remember, your admissions officer will probably be somebody who, they might be in their 20s, but most likely they're in their 30s or beyond. So they're not really your age, and you don't really need to give them details that they're not looking to hear. Some good examples. Don't talk about anything that's graphic with an illness. You can write about an illness, but it shouldn't be something that makes people queasy. And also, anything to do with love comes off very trite, and sex is also not an appropriate topic. Just not something to really discuss with somebody that you don't know, that you're just representing yourself to the first time. Uh, don't glorify mistakes or flaunt them, even if they were fun. So, writing about illegal behavior, or any kind of questionable activity, I mean, you can address that if you really want to talk about how it's changed you. That's a possibility, but don't make it into something that makes it fun or entertaining. Probably best to stay away from something you did if it wasn't legal. I mean, if you did something wrong and you want to explore that, that's fine. But if you were using drugs or you were drinking or something like that, that might not be the best topic. And of course, substance abuse or use. And also, don't write all about what's wrong with you and your personality flaws. This should show you in a positive light. So make it positive. A good thing to do is talk yourself up a little bit. You don't want to come off as pompous, which I know is, that sort of seems a little counterintuitive, but you don't want to come off as pompous, so you don't want to talk yourself up too much, but you also don't want to put yourself down. All right. Topics to avoid. So, what I was just saying, overconfidence. Don't brag about your accomplishments, but show. Remember how English teachers have always been telling you to show rather than tell? Okay, so that's what you're doing here. Um, the other thing is, don't overestimate the scope of your accomplishments. If you did something, that's great, but let's not pretend if it was something small that it's going to change the world on its own. Maybe you want to change the world. That's great. That's not a really unique topic, but it's also not a bad thing to have goals and to be optimistic. But don't overestimate the accomplishments that you did. Now, if you did something really amazing, please talk about it. If you set up something that took you many, many hours and you really have seen a huge difference and it helped your community or helped, a group of individuals, that's great. But like I said, if you started a club with 3 people, you could talk about that, but that's not going to be something that changes the school forever. All right, avoid cliches. Don't do the transcribed resume where you just talk about all the things you do. That's not interesting. I would give sports a miss. I would not do those because they get tons and tons every year, whether you talk about scoring the winning goal or making the winning shot or whatever, anything to do with sports. I broke my leg and I couldn't play, and I realized how important they were to me. I know that feels really essential to you and really central, but it's not unique. Um, Music too. Music is great. I really enjoy, playing music. I did in high school, but it's not super unique to just talk about being in band, or being in choir. It needs to be something more specific than that. Mission trips. Mission trips are also really important to a lot of people, but they are also not unique. So mission trips are something that I would avoid because also they tend to fall into some of the pitfalls that a lot of things tell you not to do in the essay. Death, divorce, and famous quotes, all those aren't great either. Death is very sad for any of us who experience it, and divorce as well, but unfortunately they're not really that unique. So it may have had a huge effect on you. I don't know if that was what I would make the focus of my essay. Famous quotes are all about somebody else, not you, so that's not great. Focus on you and not someone or something else. So the famous quotes there, but also heroes, my grandma's my hero, or, whoever it might be. That's great. That's about them, not about you. So if they tell you to write about a hero, make sure that at least most of that essay is more about you than about them. Other people's actions. So if you were involved in a situation, but it's mostly about something that was a passive thing for you, but active for somebody else, that doesn't come off looking so good. Also, work of art, favorite thing, book, movie, those are tough to write well because, you're focused on something somebody else did, not something you did. Definitely avoid being offensive. You don't know the reader, so you really don't want to anger them in any way. And you should really avoid politics, religion, oversimplifying issues, negativity about the school itself, or your high school, I would say. I wouldn't talk down CD, and I certainly wouldn't talk about negative aspects of the college to which you're applying. I wouldn't oversimplify issues. If you think that an issue like abortion is really simple and you want to write your essay about that, that could really be divisive. I think I would stay away from that topic. You don't know who's reading this. And the same with politics and religion. Now, if you were applying to a school that has a very particular stance on politics or religion. For example, if you're going to apply to a conservative religious college, if you're going to go to apply to Messiah or something, then obviously it's okay to talk about religion there because you can assume they want that in the essay. But if you're going to, Shippensburg and you're applying there, you really don't know who's reading that essay. So I would stay away from that. Now, there's nothing wrong with revealing your religion. And there's nothing wrong with revealing that you worked for somebody as a congressman or, you are a political person and you vote. But stay away from the really strong language, the really strong partisan or polemic type of language. Okay, don't whine. If you're going to be funny, make sure it's actually funny. It's hard to really be funny in writing. So if you're going to be funny, make sure it's actually entertaining. Don't be pessimistic. That doesn't go over well. You're trying to talk yourself up. Like we said before, don't brag. Try to show some individuality. Don't just write in generalities. Don't just write in big, wide statements that don't really say much, that also doesn't really make you stand out. Do not write it in verse or poetry. Don't use big words that you don't know. If you want to learn some words, fine, but run it past somebody who actually knows those words to make sure you're using it right. You don't want to be somebody who uses a word that they think describes them when it doesn't. And also, don't submit additional materials. If they want your art portfolio, they will ask for it. Make sure you proofread very carefully. Do not in any way send anything that has not been proofread multiple times by multiple people. Because if there are mistakes, especially typos, but also grammar mistakes, they will catch this. I have a friend who went to college with me who is an admissions rep for Syracuse. I know some other people who work in admissions who went to college with me. Most of them majored in English or communications. They do know what a good paper should look like. They do know what a good sentence looks like. And they will not be impressed if you have mistakes. All right, so those are just some basics to think about. It's a tough thing to do, but try to come up with something that is unique, that is actually going to set you apart from everybody else. And if you are running into trouble, try to think about things that maybe you do that just you don't talk a lot about, or things that maybe that you do that that aren't something people would expect, because something like that might set you apart in some way. So try to come up with something that in some way sets you apart. If you're stuck, ask your parents, ask your friends, but also feel free to get in touch with me. I will help you to brainstorm a little bit. So do a little brainstorming on this and see what you can come up with.